Hello there, this is Street Chess Detroit, Week 1, Game 1 for beginners. What we're going to try to do here is illustrate some of the basic mistakes that beginners will make in their games. I actually have set the computer, which is Shredder, to play on a beginner level with a rating of 1100. At 1100, the player understands how all the pieces move, understands the basic strategies of the game, but will have problems implementing those strategies. And that's what we want to highlight. What problems are beginners having so that you can erase those problems from your game and become a better player. So here we go. E4. I'm actually playing white in this game. And E4 is a basic move to try to control the center of the board. Black responds with C5, which is the Sicilian defense. And if you're going to play the Sicilian defense, you need to be very familiar with it. I start with the main line of the Sicilian. Black responds appropriately. I try to establish pawns in the center of the board. Wherever you can get your pawns side by side like this, controlling the 4 squares across the center of the board, that's always a powerful position. Black needs to understand how to break that center. The center of the board is considered these 16 squares. So if you look at your basic principles of the game, you want your pieces to occupy the center of the board and to have influence in the center of the board. Black's response here was E6. So what I'm going to do is try to establish with pawn to D5 space for white and harass black's knight. And black needs to solve the problem of his knight being attacked. If he moves his knight, I'm just going to continue to attack the knight till the knight is out of play. If he tries to go into the center, he'll lose his knight. If he attempts check, I'll break the check and attack the queen. Now he has to save his queen and save the knight. What black actually does here is pawn takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn. His knight is still under attack. He checks with his queen. Now white has to make a decision. If he blocks with the knight, that would just lose the knight. That's no good. If he blocks with the bishop, it's okay, but not the best move. If he blocks with the queen, that's no good because black will exchange queens and then he'll be free to develop. Right now that queen hampers his bishop's ability to develop. White here blocks with the bishop. Now remember, in the opening of the move, you're trying to develop your pieces. Here, white develops a piece, but more importantly, makes his king available for castle. Right now, black is, if he wants to do a kingside castle, he has to clear his knight, and then he has to clear his bishop, so he's at least 3 moves away from a kingside castle. On his queen side, he has to clear his bishop, so he's at least 2 moves away from a queenside castle. And that queenside castle already has holes in it, so there's weaknesses there. Black offers the exchange of knights. As we see, black has already moved the same piece twice. White has yet to move the same piece twice, so white is ahead in development and also ahead in space. Castles. Remember, castling early in the game is very important. Getting your king out of the center of the board and allowing your rooks to play into the center of the board is very important. If black here decides to capture, he'll be moving white's bishop into a good developing position on the long diagonal and making a file available for white to control with his rook. Black decides to continue development. White continues development, so white is still ahead in development and black has still yet to castle. Black's preparing to play out his bishop. White places his rook on the open file, and he even has some possible tactics. If nothing else, the capture of the knight would give him a passed pawn. Passed pawns are very strong, especially if the game goes to an endgame. Develops his bishop. Developing the bishop is good, but you'll notice when you develop your pieces, he's developed his bishop to a square where the bishop is unprotected at. His knight is developed and it's also protected. The other knight is developed and protected. But now there's no protection for that bishop, so white is looking for a dual threat, and he has it in knight to h4. He's threatening the bishop and also threatening to attack the knight. If he attacks this knight, that knight moves away, and then the bishop can check the king and the rook can capture the queen. That's a tactic, and you have to constantly be looking for potential tactics, especially when your opponent has allowed more than one piece unprotected. The bishop's unprotected, the pawn's unprotected, the queen is on a open file, and the king has an open diagonal for a check. And you'll notice that white's king is totally protected. So now black has a serious problem to solve. The way he chose to solve it is by protecting the bishop. And this is a problem that a lot of players have. When black looked at the move, he said, I'll protect the bishop, knight takes bishop, queen takes knight, I'm fine. But you have to consider the other moves available to your opponent. White's answer to that move was bishop to b5, pinning the queen to the king, and in essence winning the queen. He cannot block with his knight because the knight is pinned to the king. You can see all the problems that black has caused himself by leaving his king in the center of the board and by getting behind development. His solution was to capture the bishop. Of course, we know a bishop is worth 3 points, and he loses his queen, which is worth 9 points. And the points are relative to the amount of mobility that the pieces have. The queen has the most mobility, therefore the most valuable, and has been lost. Black comes up with the brilliant idea that he'll attack white's queen. White places that bishop under attack. Now black has another problem to solve. His bishop is being attacked, and the knight has the potential to fork the king and the rook. He cannot solve both of those problems. He moves back, attacking the knight. Knight moves in, checks the king, attacks the rook. The king has to get out of check. Black captured the rook. Now black is a queen and a rook down. The king is going to try to capture the knight, but at this point white will simply exchange off all the pieces, will still be a queen up, and will mate black in the endgame. So at this point black decides to resign. I hope you learned a lot in this game. The idea is to consider your opponent's move, not just consider one move, but consider all of his possible moves. In the opening, develop your pieces. Try to avoid moving the same piece twice if at all possible. And as you develop, consider your opponent's tactical possibilities. Okay, that's it. Week 1 game for beginners.